In the suffocating silence of a night that seemed too long for the clock to measure, I clicked on a nameless link buried in the labyrinthine crawl of the dark web. A link whose description was blank, whose thumbnail was nothing but a gray square. And yet the moment it opened, I realized I had condemned myself to see something no human eyes were ever meant to see. For the screen came alive not with staged theatrics or fake gore but with the raw, shaking footage of a handheld camera that trembled. As if the person holding it was nervous, or excited, or both. And the lens moved across a corridor where walls wept with damp stains, where the ceiling light flickered like a dying heartbeat, where the smell of mold and metal seemed to bleed through the pixels, and then the sound arrived. A low, distorted hum, like someone had left a generator running underground, punctuated by muffled whimpers that grew louder as the camera pushed deeper into the corridor. And suddenly the view opened into a room, a basement or perhaps a bunker, its concrete walls scrawled with symbols etched in what looked like dried blood. And in the center of that terrible stage stood a chair bolted to the floor, a chair upon which a figure was bound, gagged, their head hanging low, trembling violently as shadows of others moved just outside the light. And that was when the realization struck me like ice down my spine. The villains, the orchestrators of this nightmare, were not masked cultists or random psychopaths or neighbors hiding in plain sight. They were something older, something structured, a society of hunters who had no need for anonymity because their power came from the belief that no one could ever expose them, men and women who had refined cruelty into ritual. A syndicate that treated abduction, torture, and disappearance not as crimes but as performances for an audience hidden in the folds of the dark web, and their faces, when they finally stepped into the light, were disturbingly ordinary yet sharpened by years of deliberate practice, faces of professionals who smiled with mechanical precision as they adjusted the camera, spoke in calm tones about tonight's offering, and then gestured toward the victim who twitched helplessly in the chair, and the camera zoomed in close enough that I could see the sweat rolling down their forehead, hear the wet struggle of their breath beneath the gag, and then the leader, a tall figure in a black coat, his voice deep, confident, commanding, spoke directly to the audience, not screaming, not ranting, but explaining with the practiced calm of a lecturer what was about to happen. How the victim had been selected, how their suffering would unfold in stages, and how each stage was not random but part of a ritual designed to drain every ounce of identity, dignity, and resistance from the body, until all that remained was silence, and as he spoke, others prepared instruments that gleamed under the dim light: knives, hooks, chains, devices whose purposes were too cruel to imagine. Each one laid carefully on a table like surgical tools, polished, catalogued, ready, and then the ritual began, not with a scream but with a chant, a low rumble from every throat in the room, a chant that seemed to vibrate the very walls, a sound that resonated through my bones even though I was only a viewer, a sound that carried a strange rhythm as if it were older than language, and as they chanted, the leader lifted the victim's head, forced them to look directly into the camera, into us, into me, as if to remind us that we were not passive observers but participants, complicit by watching, complicit by not looking away. And then the suffering began in stages so slow and deliberate that time seemed to distort. The first cut shallow but precise, the victim's muffled cry piercing through the gag, the camera lingering on their eyes that pleaded desperately, but the chant drowned everything. And as blood began to drip, the leader explained each act like a surgeon teaching a class, detailing how pain unlocked different thresholds of consciousness, how fear was harvested like an energy, how every scream was a currency traded in invisible markets where only the wealthy and depraved could afford to listen live. And I realized with a sickening dread that this was no random broadcast, no accidental leak, but a scheduled event, a performance for paying audiences whose names scrolled briefly on the side of the screen, usernames with cryptic symbols and numbers, bidding, commenting, requesting specific acts, and the performers obliged with clinical precision, moving step by step, dragging out every moment, the victim breaking slowly, their spirit fracturing piece by piece, and the chant rising every time their body jerked against the restraints. And then came the revelations woven between acts, as the leader explained that this syndicate had existed for generations, passing down rituals like heirlooms, refining their craft with each decade, hiding in the shadows of wars, revolutions, and governments, using the dark web only as a new stage but never as their foundation. For their true foundation was older, buried in bloodlines and oaths that had outlived empires, and as I watched, I felt my stomach knot with the realization that what I was seeing was not just a video but a glimpse into an entire world that thrived beneath ours, a hidden layer of society where pain was both entertainment and currency, where victims were not chosen at random but carefully profiled, studied, hunted, until the night of their performance arrived, and the leader's words made it clear. Tonight it is this one. Tomorrow it could be anyone, even one of you watching now. And I wanted to stop, I wanted to close the tab, but the stream had its hooks in me, the footage hypnotizing in its cruelty, the rhythm of the chant pressing me down into my seat, the slow-motion unraveling of a human life forcing me to confront a truth darker than death. That there are people who do not kill for rage or hunger or madness, but for tradition, for ritual, for profit, for the cold ecstasy of control, and those people walk among us not as monsters in masks but as faceless. Contractors, brokers of silence, architects of fear, and their reach is endless, because every watcher who does not turn away strengthens them. Every bidder funds the next performance. Every whisper in the chat fuels the next scream. And when the victim's body finally went limp, when the chant reached its climax, when the leader leaned into the camera and whispered, "Thank you for watching," I realized that I was marked, that by staying I had been seen, and as the feed went black, a final line of text appeared on my screen in bold red letters that burned into my eyes. We know who watches. We know who stays. We know who will be next.